Welcome to the Lesbian Review podcast. I'm Sheena and I'm joined today by Erin, one of the reviewers at the Lesbian Review. She's going to give us 5 of her favourite books with women who kill. How enticing. Erin, tell me why this topic in particular.
Because I think that women who kill are very complex normally, quite layered characters. Often they're a little bit hotter because they kill. Like, I love reading thrillers, so anything that has those sorts of characters, whether it's a good character or a not so good character, I just think if they're well written, they're always entertaining. You always want to see what they're going to do next, and they're not necessarily bad girls as such, but they are, that it's just another layer to their character that I enjoy reading. I really admire writers who can capture what I imagine someone would feel like and someone would think after they have taken a life of someone, particularly because, I imagine 99% of those writers, if not all of them, haven't taken a life, and therefore it is all just what they perceive would be the case. And maybe that's why I like it so much, is because I think, like, I couldn't imagine trying to be in the head of someone who has done that and then had to then deal with that. I have way too much of a conscience. I can't even lie. So the thought of taking someone's life and then turning around and having to live with that day in, day out, it doesn't even enter my conscience. I can't do it.
Neither can I. All right, so what's your first pick?
So my first selection is Alexis Toles, or Alex Toles, from Nancy Ann Healy's Alex and Cassidy series, the first book of which is Intersection. I'll start with the synopsis. FBI agent Alexis Toles is dispatched to New Rochelle, New York, to investigate threatening letters sent to Congressman Christopher O'Brien and to protect his ex-wife Cassidy and 6-year-old son Dylan. But when she gets to New Rochelle, Alex discovers that there is more to the situation than simple stalking or political agendas. She finds that she has growing romantic feelings for Cassidy and that the feelings are mutual. As Alex and Cassidy explore their budding romance, they must surmount many obstacles in explaining their relationship to those around them, including Dylan. All the while, the investigation continues, and the disturbing, convoluted, and complicated web surrounding the threat begins to unravel, placing the characters' lives in grave danger.
So Alex is a good guy.
She is a good guy. She is an FBI agent who has a military past, and that's introduced quite early on and is really quite important to the storyline. So pretty much, like, as far as I'm concerned, she's kind of like, what I have written about her is that she has sex on legs, but really, really long legs. She's smart and she's quite sweet, and she's cool under pressure. And she's a trained forensic psychologist, so she has that, that background of being really intense and strategic in what she does and quite analytical. And then she just starts falling madly in love with this woman who she's supposed to protect. Yeah, so the first one is, the first book is a really great introduction to her as a character.
I know that Nancy Ann Healy's work is wildly popular. Her series novels are hitting like cult status almost.
Yeah, she's one of those writers that can create a character that gets better through a series rather than getting boring or just being the same. I think her characters just add layers with each book.
Which takes some serious writing skill.
Yeah, it's not something that I could ever hope to do, but, I bow down to her. She does it very well.
Okay, what a great first pick. What's your next one then?
My next one is a character from The Organisation by Annette Mori and Erin O'Reilly. The character's name is Val. She featured initially in Asset Management by Annette Mori as a real peripheral character, and The Organisation brings her right to the forefront, and she is essentially the lead character. So the story, basically, the feisty and fiery women from Asset Management are back for another heart-stopping adventure. This time, their sights are set on a new mob boss, Leonid Petrov, who is more cunning and 10 times more ruthless than the slave trader they took on in Asset Management. No one is more surprised than Val when she is tagged as the go-to member of the team. Her task infiltrate Leonard's inner circle and work with another agent already on the inside. Val's impenetrable exterior is starting to crumble, but Maggie, the head of the organization, doesn't have a better option. Tasked with keeping Leonard's impossible new wife, Gina, safe, Val encounters more problems than solutions. Will wildcard Gina provide Val the inspiration to take on her violent husband, or will that inspiration lead to Val's downfall? So essentially, Val she's badass, man. She is one cool character. She's butch, she's fearless, she's seriously deadly, and she's like a shoot first, ask questions later type of woman. You get the sense that she's really dark, but she has this really dark exterior, and then essentially she's a bit of an enigma, I guess, at the start, and then as the story unravels, so do the layers of Val, and you lose the devil may care attitude, and the secret past comes out, and she gets much more intriguing as the book goes along and much more attractive. And so, like, if you love a woman who is butch and badass, she's definitely your girl. You get to see this really sweet side of her at times, but also this side that just makes you, like, she gave me chills a couple of times because I was like, how can someone be so cold and yet be so sweet at other times? She's a great character.
So your first two are both good guys. That's an interesting choice.
Well, I don't know. I mean, essentially, yes, she's a good guy. She doesn't necessarily have a good past. She's the kind of woman who will go and set up. She is really, like I say, shoot first, ask questions later. So she's quite happy to go and set up bombs and things, and then just whoever accidentally dies, and that is not a big problem for her. So there's there's those two sides to the character where I think she wants to have a moral sort of high ground, if you like, but she almost gets there and then she falls over again.
Okay, so she's quite a complex character then.
She is complex.
Which is one of the best kinds.
I agree.
And this is one of the reasons that Women Who Kill is so interesting. And thrillers in particular, and cop procedural books, but thrillers in particular are just amazing for allowing that sort of characterization to happen in a book.
I'm reasonably new to the thriller subgenre of lesfic. Like, I've read a lot of mainstream thrillers, but it wasn't until recently that I really sort of got into the thriller genre in lesfic. But now that I have, I'm just like, yep, give me more. And thankfully, there seems to be more and more coming out all the time. My to-be-read file is only a couple of 100 books long now, so that's good. I'll get there.
Is that all?
Yeah. Well, look, I read a lot. I'm trying to catch up, but, life gets in the way.
Oh, you'll never catch up on lesfic, because just as you think you're getting there, 60,000 new books come out, and that all gets added to your to-read list. You're talking to a pro here.
Yeah, and then I make the mistake of becoming friends with people like yourself and Tara, and, I suddenly have 45 books recommended a week, and I'm like, what? Where did that come from? So, yeah.
Yeah, I've stopped listening to Tara's recommendations because otherwise I just have way too many books to read. And I think that's why she actually made and playing the role of herself as the October book club read last year, because I refused to read it. And so she made it a book club read.
Do you want to know a secret? It was me that picked it, not her. But she didn't hesitate to say yes. Yeah, but it was my fault because I suggested it as a book that we had both read, because we didn't have a lot of common ground when we were looking to pick. So, and she, you know what she's like about thrillers. Yeah, she likes thrills of different kinds.
Ain't that the truth of the matter? Okay, Erin, so what's your next book?
The book is From a Distance by C.L. Hart, and the character is a military-trained assassin called Kenzie. The synopsis essentially says, who do you trust when you have no one left but yourself? Kenzie is a military-trained assassin hunting her target in Mexico. Corey is a student at the University of Guadalajara. One fateful afternoon, their lives will come together under a flurry of gunfire. Questioning the lies around them, they will soon learn that they cannot live without each other. On the run from an unknown enemy, they must learn to trust each other and to believe they'll make it out alive. And this book won the 2011 GCLS Literary Award for Mystery and Thriller, which was how I initially came to read it, was that I was looking through past winners of that particular award, and this book came along and was... It's a great book. Like, so there's a lot of military background, a lot of political sort of... that crossover between political and military and whatnot. And Kenzie is a character who, for all intents and purposes, doesn't actually exist. She's done her time in the military, and then she suddenly gets pulled into this new role and trained as an assassin. And because of that, she no longer exists in the real world. And so it's quite interesting. It's almost like Lone Wolf falls in love type storyline. So yeah, I mean, without obviously including any further spoilers, she is like, she's quite sexy, she's lethal, she's a killing machine. The opening chapter or the opening scene really is her assassinating someone, and it's just so well written that instantly I was like, right, I'm not reading any other books until I have finished this one, which I don't do often. I really enjoyed it.
That sounds right up my alley. I definitely need to go find that one and give it a read.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It's something that you could imagine watching at the movies almost. And I don't say that about a lot of books.
See, now you're being bad for my reading list.
Oh, look, that's 1 point to me, 47,000 to you. We'll get there. We'll even up eventually, I'm sure.
All right, Erin, so what's your next book?
Okay, my fourth pick is from the book Close Enough to Touch by Kate Brogan, which coincidentally is a pen name for K.A. Moll, for those of you that don't know that. And so my pick is Joanna Gray, who is the lead antagonist in the book. So Joanna Gray injects the deadly poison into the chamber of the syringe, time after time. She's murdered before, and she'll do it again. She's intelligent, educated, and beautiful. At 35, Riley Hayes is a respected homicide detective. Her best friends are her grandparents, her coonhound, and her partner, in that order. She's about ready to give up on the idea of a relationship. She hasn't seen the love of her life, Kenzie Bigham, since college. At 34, Kenzie Bigham is the single mom of a 13-year-old, a church secretary, and a woman who struggled much of her adult life with her own sexuality. Their paths will cross when Riley's new investigation involves members of Kenzie's congregation. They'll discover that the passage of time may have offered them a second chance at love, just as Joanna sights her next target. Will Riley have what it takes to meet the challenge of a serial killer who's proven herself to be a more than worthy opponent? This is my first book that I have read, written by K.A. Moll. I, immediately, when I opened the book, I was like, oh my gosh, she's already, I already know who the killer is, which doesn't happen often. When I read it the first time, the synopsis, and I was like, wow, so this woman, is she a doctor that kills people? Is she some sort of euthanasia type thing, or because of the way that it was sort of framed in the synopsis, I was like, maybe she's a good guy, maybe she's not a bad guy, but she's a bad guy, and I like that. Yeah, I mean, she's crazy deadly, she's straight up crazy, but she's also crazy deadly. The way that she kills and the way that is written is just outstanding, in my opinion. As she goes on killing through the book, I think you see more of her character laid bare, and she's really a very tortured, very haunted person. Yeah, I've just basically, she's a genius character and written by a genius author. That's all that you can say, really. She's just, she's perfection. And, she's pursued by Riley, who is evidently the protagonist of a new series of books, which I'm really looking forward to the second one, because the first one just left me going, wow.
K.A. Moll, under her name K.A. Moll, wrote her very first thriller in 2017, and I loved that one so much that it hit my top 10 books of the year list.
Wow.
It's called For a Moment's Indiscretion, and it's about the two main characters of her very first book. And she paired them up with a crazy woman and put them in a scenario which I did not see coming. Fantastic read. And I love when authors are willing to torture their characters just a little bit. Anyway, I got so very excited when I read this book that I messaged her and said, you have to do more thrillers. And so naturally, when she came out with the Kate Brogan pen name, I was delighted. She does have a knack of getting into crazy people's heads in a way that most authors don't. And it excites me. And in Close Enough to Touch, Joanne is such an interesting character. And the research that went into the different poisons was fascinating because she doesn't use just one poison. She uses a multitude of poisons. So I really loved that aspect too.
Yeah, I mean, what amazes me about that in particular is K.A. Moll is quite prolific. You know, like there are books coming out often and she has quite a lot of work out there. And yet the character seems so well researched, and like this woman clearly does not sleep. All she ever does is write, because how else can she find that much to build her character with? Like, yeah, she's just genius.
Moll is extremely focused, and she writes every day. And she sits down and she just does it. She's truly a master. And what's interesting is I actually was so fascinated by the character of Joanna in this particular book that I kept messaging her and asking her questions. And I asked her if in her work she ever came across actual sociopaths or psychopaths. And she didn't come across psychopaths, but she did come across sociopaths. And what's so interesting for me is the sexual element to the sociopath in this book. There's a justification behind the poisoning because she's doing God's work, and she can't help how she's attracted to the woman, but it's almost like she's justifying that as almost one of the reasons she's killing them.
Yeah, it's there's shades to a certain extent. There's shades of the antagonist in things like the Da Vinci Code, where there's like that drive that comes, well, it's derived from religion, but it becomes so twisted and morphed in their heads that, you know, and I just thought that Joanna, the further you got into the book and the further you got into her head, the more I was just like, wow, like this character is just fascinating. And done it, she made her the killer, so you know that there's a finite period that you can write about this person. And it's not, you know, I hate it when the person that is most likely to not be in the next book or the next book after that or the next book after that is the best character. Because you're grabbed by a book and then the second one is almost like because that character's not necessarily in it or isn't necessarily such a strong influence on it.
Yeah, but Jana's going to be back.
I suspect, but we will wait with bated breath for that there book to come on out.
Okay, so who is your final pick, Erin?
Okay, so my final pick is Beck Nash from the 21 Weeks books by R.A. Lachey. At this point, I can reasonably confidently say that she doesn't kill during the book. So technically, I've twisted the rules a little, but she's a cop, she's a detective. I'll read the synopsis and then I'll tell you why I picked her. So Beck Nash arrives in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Homicide Division with a shaky reputation and a lot to prove. Her first moment's a disaster. She gets the chance to redeem herself with her first murder investigation and a sympathetic new partner. Trying to adjust to the mold and no idea how she's going to adapt her questionable investigative techniques to her new position, Beck's only goal is to make it to the week's end. But as shocking as the first day of her first week in homicide turns out, it will be nothing compared to her last. 21 Weeks is a fast-paced police procedural thriller series that ramps up in intensity with each victim that falls until its explosive final week. Originally, it was released as a series, so it was released week by week. You can now get it in 3 books, so it's like a trilogy, if you like. Week 1 to 7, 8 to 14, and then 15 to 21. So it is obviously 21 weeks. And it is epic, and I mean that in the traditional sense of the word. Like, it is nearly 1,200 pages of awesomeness. And Beck, she's one seriously hot, seriously screwed up cop who, you know, she's got that real TV cop kind of history, you know. She had a hard time growing up, and she had to grow up too fast, and she grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and all of that stuff going on. But she is seriously good at what she does and super smart, and I find that really sexy, the whole smart, you know, like, she is the one to crack the case, and she is the one to go, actually, there are ways that we can work out how this serial killer is going to kill next and where they're going to be and that sort of thing. So without being spoilery, they're chasing one serial killer who has come back after a long period of time of being dormant, and Beck is working with the detective on the original case, who is still a detective. And so Beck comes in, and fresh eyes and smart mind goes, hang on a minute, there's a pattern here to the second part of this. You know, the serial killer is really dark and twisty and gross and does all these really awful things to people and essentially preys on their worst fears. So chooses to kill people in really torturous ways mentally and psychologically, because the killer preys on the worst fear of that person and then kills them that way. And Beck, she has this great network of support characters who are just all really, really well written, and they're all really interesting, and you know, like her friends from when she was younger growing up, they all sort of make their way into the storyline, and it's such a good book. It is really long, but it is really good. And like I said, she's kind of a bit of an incidental lesbian, really, because there is no, maybe this is why I like it so much, there is no real romance line in the story. You get the impression that there is some romance going on behind the scenes and things, but there's nothing really specifically that jumps out and says, hey, this was written with a romantic arc to it at all. It is pure thriller. I can't rate it highly enough. I really, really enjoyed this book.
You say it's 1,200 pages?
Over the 3 books, yeah. The first book is like 405 pages or something, and then the next book's about 390, and then the next book's around 400 as well. So it is an awful long read, but it is so worth it. And it's, I guess, because it's broken into 3, you can kind of step away from it in between the books. Because, I mean, 400 words is quite a long book as a standalone, but to carry the series through 3 of those, I'm in genuine awe of the author on this one, because it's like it's almost like a little bit of a Rizzoli and Isles type storyline, but Isles isn't quite so big as a character. And I wonder if maybe it started off as a little bit of fanfic type thing around that, because, you know, the medical examiner, and there's a little bit of flirtation and a little bit of sort of underlying sort of innuendo between the detective and the medical examiner, but it's just a really great thriller read. And, you know, I love that, so that's why it's my last choice, even though technically she hasn't killed. It's because she's thrilled in a big way in my shoes. So, yeah, it's a great read, and you should definitely check it out if you're into thrillers and into, you know, being on the edge of your seat and wanting to get... It's one of those awful books where you're like, I'll just read one more chapter. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're like, actually, that was 7 more chapters, and I'm just going to read one more. So if you've got a real job, don't read this book.
That's exactly the kind of book we like to read, though, isn't it? Erin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Lesbian Review podcast. I'm Sheena. I've been joined today by Erin, and we are both reviewers at the Lesbian Review. You can find all of the reviews on thelesbianreview.com. You can also come and join our Facebook group. If you enjoy this podcast, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get exclusive content. Links to the books we spoke about today, as well as links to our Patreon account, our book club, and our website are all in the show notes. That's all for this week. Bye.
Bye.